First, there's now a stable government, and more importantly, a purposeful government. I think stable is not enough. We need a government has to be purposeful, and I think there's a purposeful government led by Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim. A year ago, the chatter was asking whether this government will survive. Now, the chatter is asking whether Anwar can win the next general election. I think that at least there's some progress. And I'm quite sure if this government can govern and create a second economic takeoff with equitable distribution, with many people sharing the fruits of progress and growth, then the government will be a lasting one. The second factor is that the global reorganization of supply chain, as you have already been very clear, and I know that there are many global players here, you're very clear that you know that there is a global reorganization of supply chain due to US-China competition, as well as the post-pandemic realization of the need to have a shorter and more resilient supply chain, put Malaysia in a very unique and strategic place. This you don't have to ask anyone, you just have to ask Dato' Asman. He'll tell you the story of why there is congestions at the port and why there is a need for shorter and more resilient supply chain due to global conflict and also due to various challenges post-pandemic. The third factor is that Malaysia is very well positioned in the global tech upcycle. For the longest of time, at least for several years, the tech was mainly driven by smartphone and computer. And I think it has plateaued after COVID. But the tech sector now, in the last year or so, is very different. The tech sector is now driven by AI and driven by automotive. And Malaysia plays a very important role. I'm not sure whether there's anyone in the automotive chips industry. I didn't realize the importance of automotive chips from Malaysia until I went to Detroit. I went to Detroit and Gina Raimondo, Commerce Secretary of the United States, said, because of the shutdown of Malaysian factories during COVID, automotive companies in Detroit had to shut down. And that's how important Malaysia is in the global automotive chips production. Malaysia constitutes 13% of global back-end semiconductor trade, about 7% of global semiconductor trade, and about 23% of US semiconductor trade. So Malaysia is very strategic, much as we are in the back end mostly, but we are in a very strategic position. I always use this word, we are not the most, we haven't captured the most value of semiconductor, but we are nonetheless indispensable. That means you take out Malaysia, automotive companies will not be able to assemble cars because the chips is produced in Malaysia. And we want to do more. Prime Minister Dato' Sri Anwar has announced or launched the National Semiconductor Strategy on 28th of May in order to galvanize the semiconductor industry. We want to see a lot more IC design. We want to see a lot more advanced packaging. Hopefully, there will be fabs. And we also noted that we have a very significant equipment industry. Today, I was replying questions in Parliament before I came. And I noted during my reply, from January to May, the machine and equipment industry, or export of machine and equipment grew by 21.8%. Thanks to AI, the AI hype, whether it's hype or up story, but the point is that machine and equipment is significant in Malaysia, and it is growing. The export is growing by 21% in the first 5 months of the year. And I look it up. Export of equipment is 4.6% of our total export. Export of palm oil is 4.9% of our total export. Imagine that the export of equipment is almost the size of the export of palm oil, which is very significant. Now, the fourth factor is that the warmer and closer ties Prime Minister Anwar is building with ASEAN neighbors, especially the Johor-Singapore ties, with China, as we have just celebrated the 50th anniversary of Malaysia-China relationship with the visit of Premier Lee Chiang, and with countries in the global south, such as Brazil, will certainly make Malaysia a more interesting and dynamic economy. Malaysia will be chairing ASEAN in 2025, and we have indicated that we'll join BRICS. And on Tuesday this week, Prime Minister also announced in Parliament that we are considering joining OECD, because Thailand and Indonesia has applied to join OECD, and we are also considering joining OECD. So in our foreign policy, we have a very strong DNA, a non-aligned DNA, but at the same time, we are also attempting to be multi-aligned. That means we are not aligned to one, we are trying to be multi-aligned. I'm looking forward to the leadership of MICCI in the following three areas. I promise you that I will stop after the 3 big points. I think there are 3 important points when we think of Malaysia in the place of in the world, and also how we can take Malaysia to the next step. The first big point is, in order for us to grow and grow well, and grow together with our ASEAN neighbors, we will have to start thinking about racing to the top and not racing to the bottom. What I mean by that, for the longest of time, we have been thinking of competing to, for instance, competing to press down wages. We don't have enough cheap labor, so we hire from foreign countries. We are competing sometimes with our neighbors on giving tax incentive to foreign companies. We're competing to pollute our environment. Whether Malaysia or our neighbors, we're competing to race to the bottom, we're competing to emit more carbon emission. But moving forward, if we have a much longer horizon, we should work with our neighbors, work with our immediate neighbors in ASEAN, to say that we want to race together, we want to race to the top together. We want to race to the top together so that we don't compete on pressing down wages, because when our workers have more money in their hand, they will consume, and their consumption is important, because we want to create a middle-class society in Malaysia, and we want the ASEAN to be a middle-class society. Imagine that ASEAN becomes a big middle-class society, it will become a big market. So positioning Malaysia is very important. I hear many people telling me, we're competing with Vietnam, we're competing with Indonesia. I say, we just need to get our price right, position ourselves right, then we are not going to compete with Vietnam, we are not going to compete with Indonesia. We can form a healthy vertical integration with Vietnam or Indonesia by being very clear that Malaysia is not just a Vietnam plus. Malaysia is not just manufacturing, cheap manufacturing. Malaysia is a Singapore at a discount. Not sure whether you hear this. Malaysia is not a Vietnam plus, but Malaysia is a Singapore at a discount. The second big point I want to make is that we do not want to just manufacture for export. Okay? Manufacturing for export, when everyone has huge capacity like Christina, yet US has a shrinking middle class, at some point you will have clashes, and we are already seeing that clashes. We want to be an innovating nation, and we also want our innovation not just for export purposes, but the innovation that we drive, that your businesses drive, will also improve the living standard and productivity of this nation. Why I say so? When I was just in Parliament before I came here, a group of agriculture producers in Johor came to Parliament. And they were coming to me and say, hey, can you help us to get more foreign workers? Can you help us to get this and that? So I say, why don't we sit down and think about this? Why don't we get some equipment producer in Malaysia and help you to think about how to mechanize? And then we create domestic demand for machine tools, domestic demands for agriculture machine tools, and we build from there. And half of the guys say, no, very difficult, we want cheap foreign labor. The other half say, okay, not a bad idea, let's do it. Beyond that, urban solutions, transport solutions, defense industry, healthcare, green transition, all this should be opportunity for us to innovate, to provide innovative solutions, to create business opportunity for Malaysian companies, and also to create a better living standard and a more productive society, whether in agriculture, whether in transport, whether in urban solutions. This is a mission that I hope all of you here, the industrial player, will consider using your industrial capacity, using your innovative capacity in order to solve national problem, create new business opportunity, and improve living standard, improve the productivity of the nation as a whole. The third big point I would like to share is that we want to grow Malaysian champions. In the National Semiconductor Strategy, the Prime Minister pointed out that there are about 10 tech companies which are having the revenue of about 1 billion ringgit a year. We want to see that with this wave of tech upcycle, we want to see hopefully these 10 companies within a decade will become $1 billion and not just 1 billion ringgit. We will have another 100 Malaysian companies that will be at 1 billion ringgit, so that we create a lot more Malaysian companies and Malaysian businesses to become regional and global champion. The government will have to rethink and working together with you to see how to ensure that FDI that comes into the country result in a lot more localization. For a long period of time, when you talk to industry and say, hey, can you source from Malaysia? They will tell you products from China is very cheap. But today, because of the global shift, because of geopolitics, there's now a tango. There's now a tango where the government also wants to see a lot more localization, especially when FDI comes in. It cannot be everything from every equipment being brought from other countries, but a lot more localization. But for the industry, for foreign companies that have relocated to Malaysia, especially in recent 1 or 2 years, they also want to see a shorter supply chain. They also want to source from Malaysia, partly because they are no longer sourcing from China, also partly because they want a shorter supply chain. So I think it has come to an equilibrium where we can work in concert with FDI to create a very robust Malaysian industrial scene. And I hope these 3 major points can be a mission for all of you. When I use mission, I specifically use in the context of what Mariana Mazzucato mentioned in her mission economy. The idea is this. The idea is that economy is not an end to itself. The economy has to create better living standard. The economy has to create better life for the majority of people to ensure the societies will be stable in the long run. And also the government has a role to work with the industry. So she cited the case of the Apollo program, when John Kennedy announced in 1961 that by the end of the decade, the United States wanted to see man on the moon. And because of that mission, many patents, many IP were created, including GPS, including the internet. These were all seeded because of the Apollo program. And I want to see that all of you, together with the government, we have this sense of mission that our industry can create a better society. our industrial capacity, our capacity for innovation can create better life for so many Malaysians and for Malaysia to be an important nation. Finally, just a bit of self-promotion if I'm allowed to do so. I've just published a book with the title Second Takeoff, Strategies for Malaysia's Economic Resurgence. The idea is relatively simple, that Malaysia had its first economic takeoff between 1988 and 1997. During that period of time, we grew by 9% almost annually, and wages also grew by 9% annually. There was a sense that the nation will become better tomorrow better than today, next year better than this year, next generation will be better off than this generation. But we have lost, as a nation, we have lost that sense that this nation could be a great nation. So like Dato' Asman, I say we have a second chance and we can make this nation great. Thank you very much.